CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The Chinese foreign minister is in the Gambia for his Africa tour. The U.S. sends troops to Gabon ahead of possible election protests in Congo. And the UN to send a new envoy to Somalia after the expulsion of Nicholas Haysom. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this half hour. Egypt and Israel are reportedly cooperating against ISIL militants in the Sinai. In our top story, China's Foreign Minister Wang is now in Gambia for his traditional New Year tour in Africa. On Friday, he met with his counterpart in Burkina Faso, Alpha Barry. Both agreed their cooperation is off to a good start. Wang also met with the country's president, Roch-Marc Christian Kabore. Now, the African nation re-established ties with Beijing in May last year after cutting off ties with Taiwan. Burkina Faso's president emphasized his commitment to the One China policy, noting that he hopes to strengthen relations with Beijing. Wang said the resumption of diplomatic relations laid a foundation for cooperation and that China will do its best to help Burkina Faso. Well, Wang Yi's visit to Gambia is the first after China and the Gambia resumed diplomatic ties in 2016. That's after the Gambia ended formal relations with Taiwan. Well, looking at China-Gambia ties, Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Gambian counterpart, Adama Barrow, have met on 2 occasions, most recently at the conclusion of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. The countries signed various agreements to increase cooperation, and in the 2 years since resuming ties, the nations have seen bilateral ties develop positively. The Gambian government adheres to the One China policy, while China supports the Gambian government's efforts to rebuild the country and enhance peace and security. Infrastructure development is also a priority area. Now, Wang Yi says this visit to Africa aims to both implement the outcomes of last year's China-Africa Cooperation Forum and further promote bilateral ties. But for many years, some Western countries have blamed China's economic aid to the continent for creating a debt crisis. Mendo Joseph Olivier from the School of International Studies at Peking University shared his thoughts.
For Africa, Chinese financing, by extension, the FOCAC, it's one important options, especially consider the fact that there are many others like key actors. There are many others partners to the continent. So, for instance, China involvement in few sectors like energy, infrastructure, investment. It's it might be able to boost the African economy. So, to think such a cooperation is a debt trap, I really doubt it. I doubt about it, especially. Because any African nation with a sustainable development plan will surely benefit from the cooperation with China.
Now, in other news on the continent, the U.S. has deployed about 80 troops to Gabon over fears of unrest in nearby Democratic Republic of Congo. President Donald Trump says the forces may be used to protect Americans in the DRC if violence escalates over the disputed election there. Suspicion is growing over last week's presidential vote, with the government squaring off against the Catholic Church over a delay in results. CGTN's Chris Wheelock has the latest.
The election to replace Joseph Kabila has been chaotic from the start. Delayed for 2 years, there are allegations of numerous irregularities. Names missing from voter lists, technical issues with new voting machines, delayed or missing polling station materials. In key opposition strongholds, more than 1 million voters were barred from voting until March, effectively negating their voices entirely. The Election Commission said ethnic violence and the risk of spreading the Ebola virus from those areas in the country's east justify the delay. Despite these issues, Election Day passed in relative calm and vote counting got underway. But ballots quickly piled up, a problem exacerbated after the government cut off internet and text messaging access nationwide. The government said the action was taken to preserve public order after what it called fictitious results were circulated. The heavily influential Catholic Church on Thursday said its data, collected from 40,000 observers, show a clear winner in the election, but it's barred by law from naming a winner, something only the Election Commission can do. Instead, Catholic bishops called on the government to publish accurate results, a call that drew criticism and a rebuke from the commission. Tensions are running high in Kinshasa and elsewhere, with few now expecting provisional election results to be released on Sunday as planned.
We are concerned that these efforts to silence dissent could backfire considerably when the results are announced. And we are watching carefully, and we are calling on all sides to refrain from the use of violence.
The ruling party candidate Emmanuel Shadari has said he expects to win, while opinion polls before the vote indicated opposition candidate Martin Fayulu was the favorite. Definitive results of the election are due January 15th, with the new president set to be sworn in January 18th. Chris Wheelock, CGTN.
And let's go to South Sudan now, where 19 civilians have been killed and 8 others wounded in a village in the southern part of the country. The attack has been blamed on opposition forces that are loyal to the National Salvation Front. The government is calling on the country's ceasefire monitoring body and the United Nations mission in the country to carry out investigations into this latest violation of the permanent ceasefire agreement.
SSPDF condemns in the strongest terms possible unjustified killing of innocent civilians. On the same note, the Army calls upon IGAD, AU, EU, Troika and the international community to hold to account Gerald Thomas Cirillo and his Madras field commanders.
And to neighboring Sudan, where President Omar al-Bashir has told police to exercise restraint when dealing with protesters. Bashir was reacting to recent protests in the country, which have led to the deaths of 19 people. Anti-government rallies have rocked cities across the country since December. On Friday, protesters once again took to the streets from a mosque in Omdurman, parallel to Khartoum on the west bank of the Nile. But they were swiftly confronted by police who fired tear gas to disperse them.
We do not kill people. We are here to provide protection and a life of dignity and luxury. However, in the end, only the righteous will prevail. If we are obliged to use weapons in order to strengthen our security, then we must use them with the least force and damage possible.
The United Nations Secretary General will appoint a new envoy to Somalia to replace Nicholas Haysom, who has been expelled by the East African country. Somalia's government had declared Haysom persona non grata after he raised questions about the detention of a political candidate and the security forces' response to ensuing demonstrations. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo spoke to Somalia's Foreign Affairs Minister about the implications of the row with the UN.
We differentiate the UN and the individual, whether top diplomat or staff member of the UN at any level. In that, UN is a valuable partner. They sustain Somalia, they help Somalia, they continue to help us. We appreciate their support and help. And the United Nations is here to stay for the Somali people. As I said in previous interviews, we are the UN. That's one thing. Any individual, whether top diplomat or otherwise, who does not respect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the dignity of the Somali people, we have a right to show him the door.
Is there room for the United Nations and the Somali government to resolve this issue in your own view, Your Excellency?
Yes, from our perspective, there's a room to resolve the issue. It's to recall the Mr. Haytham. He could be given another assignment by the UN. That's up to the UN. But as far as we are concerned, we told the ambassador, we told the SRSG, Mr. Haytham, that we are not happy with his actions, his attitude to Somalia, and we made our decision based on that.
The top UN official also highlighted a critical issue on the government's de facto program. Now he's saying that the way the government acted will have a long-term effect on former combatants who seek to rejoin the government. Is that argument justified?
Yeah, we think that we don't believe it. It's his judgment, and these are some of the judgments that we found are not informed by the reality. It's actually ironical that the SRSG finds an excuse for a murderer like Al-Shabaab. We don't believe that this will deter any Al-Shabaab member who is willing to be rehabilitated to join the Somali, his people, his nation, and leave the ugly actions of killing people.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Egypt and Israel reportedly cooperating against ISIL militants in the Sinai. And Mali's president visits a village massacre site as the UN calls for action. Continuing a tradition of 29 years, Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang this week is in Africa for his first overseas visit in the new year. So why did he choose Ethiopia, Senegal, the Gambia and Burkina Faso? And what can be expected from his visit? Talk Africa, this Saturday at 17:30 GMT, only on CGTN.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Mali's President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has visited the graves of 37 villagers killed during a New Year's Day massacre that's been blamed on warring communities. Residents have blamed traditional Dogon ethnic hunters for the attack. The UN says women and children were also killed in a village of Fulani herders, this in the latest violence between the two groups. 7 people were arrested a day after the attacks. And of course, Mali's army has sent forces to the scene after the massacre and also into Boboso village near the border with Burkina Faso. The UN says more than 500 people were killed in violence in the area in 2018.
We have come to tell you that the Malian state is with you. We offer the condolences of the nation.
German government representatives have urged Europe to act as an NGO ship from the German charity Seawatch remains stranded at sea. The ship is carrying 32 migrants and it has been at sea since December 22nd. Both Italy and Malta have refused to offer the ship a place to dock. German politicians boarded Sea-Watch 3 on Friday in order to see the situation on the ship for themselves. The German parliamentarians for the Social Democrats Party are now calling for action in order to prevent a humanitarian crisis.
It's a humanitarian task to act now. There's no possibility of delay, and we can't say we have to find a collective European systematic solution. We must act now. It's for saving people. The second thing is we need a system. We need a functioning system of receiving people, and it must work on land and not on the sea. We must end this catastrophe of having once again these situations on the sea, and we must do it as fast as possible.
Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has confirmed for the first time that his military is working in cooperation with Israel in efforts to fight extremists in Egypt's North Sinai. Al-Sisi's remarks were made during an interview with American broadcaster CBS. Cairo has been heavily engaged in a war against militant groups affiliated to ISIL. Here's Adel Al-Makhraoui with more.
Cairo has never commented before on reports that it is cooperating with the Israeli Defense Forces to fight militants in the Sinai. At least it has not commented yet. American broadcaster CBS says that in a televised interview with the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, he has confirmed that the Egyptian Armed Forces is working with the Israelis to counter terrorism and fight ISIL militants in North Sinai. According to the network, when al-Sisi was asked if the cooperation with Israel was at its closest, the Egyptian president responded that was correct. The network went on to say that the Israelis were allowed to airstrike some locations in the Sinai. It hasn't, however, attributed this information to the Egyptian president. It's not the first time that the information about Israeli aerial strikes against militants in Egypt has been reported. Although not announced in details, cooperation between the two states has been clear. The peace treaty between Egypt and Israel does not allow Cairo to have heavy military presence in North Sinai. Yet Egypt has been holding a massive military operation against militants for almost a year now. CBS claims that Cairo has requested that the interview would not be aired. The Egyptian government has not yet made any public announcement about the issue. Adel Al-Makhraoui, CGTN, Cairo.
Around 37% of Orthodox Christians celebrate Christmas on January 7th, unlike Catholics and Protestants who celebrate the birth of Jesus on December 25th. Now, celebrating Christmas on January 7th dates back to 1582, when astronomers and scientists during the Roman Pope Gregory XIII's era noticed a mistake in calculating the length of the Greek solar year. Yasser Hakim looks at the countdown to celebrations in Cairo.
The country is bracing for the Coptic Christmas. While most Christians celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December every year, for Coptic Christians, mainly in Egypt and Russia, it's January 7th.
According to the Eastern calendar, the 7th of January is the birth of Jesus, and it's Christmas for the Orthodox Christians. For the Evangelical, it's the 4th. As for the Western calendar, they celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December. At the end, we all enjoy the festivities from the 25th of December till the 7th of January.
The rituals include praying and fasting for a certain period of time.
We fast for 43 days, but it's light fasting, where we eat vegan food and are allowed fish too. On the night of the 7th of January, we go to church for the Mass, and then we break the fast and begin celebrations.
Security is being revamped around most churches. Coptic Christians have been targeted by terrorist groups during the festive period in the last few years. More than 300,000 policemen have been deployed to ensure safe proceedings this year.
We can clearly feel the strong security presence for the Christmas, not only in this church but around all churches we visited and the surrounding areas. It's comforting, and we are sure we will enjoy the Christmas this year.
And in a sign of solidarity, many Muslims have announced they will be attending the Mass to share the celebrations with their Christian friends. The festivities this year will be unique, as Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will be inaugurating the largest Orthodox cathedral in the Middle East at the new administrative capital, and it will host this year's Mass as well. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And coming up in your sports news, up next. Egypt's table tennis prodigy